Every kid growing up in America knows the final school bell in June marks the start of pure, unfiltered summer freedom. The sun turns warm and golden, the afternoon breeze carries a soft, gentle heat, and every neighborhood lawn smells of freshly cut grass. Corner convenience stores stock up on icy sodas and bright popsicles in every color imaginable. For most 9-year-olds, summer means pool parties, running around with neighborhood friends, binge-watching cartoons late at night, and fun little family trips planned by their parents. But for me, every bit of joy I hoped for that summer boiled down to one single thing: a fancy family vacation my dad had promised me for months. My name's Leah, and I'm 9 years old. To everyone in our small town, I come from a perfect, picture-perfect family. My dad, Brian, was born into money. Thanks to his family's old real estate holdings and a steady trust fund, he never had to work a hard day in his life to live a solid upper-middle-class lifestyle. Out in public, he's gentle, polite, and well-liked. Every neighbor calls him a reliable man, and all his friends see him as classy and respectable. But only I know the truth behind closed doors. That kindness and dignity he shows the world never belongs to me. My parents got divorced when I was 5, and Dad remarried right after. Ever since then, I've been nothing more than an extra, unwanted piece in my own home. 4 years of separation, 4 years of quiet distance, and I've long learned to walk on eggshells around everyone in my house. All of Dad's tenderness, patience, and unconditional affection goes to my stepmom, Maya, and her 2 kids, 11-year-old Jason and 8-year-old Zoe. I'm just the leftover child from his first marriage, the one nobody bothers to notice, the afterthought no one cares about. Even after all the neglect, I still held on to a naive, childish hope. I truly believed Dad still loved me deep down. I told myself he was just busy, just caught up in his new family, and that he hadn't forgotten about his only biological daughter. That's why, on a calm late May evening, when he knelt down, brushed my hair back, and said he'd take the whole family to a luxury 5-star beach resort in Palm Beach, Florida for summer break, I stayed up the entire night crying happy tears. It was the first time in years I truly felt like I belonged in my own family. I thought the years of being overlooked were finally over. I thought my dad was finally going to see me, to love me, to spend time with his own daughter. My stepmom Maya is gorgeous and incredibly charismatic. She knows exactly how to work a room and win people over. In front of neighbors, friends, and strangers, she's the textbook perfect stepmother, warm, generous, tidy, and devoted to her family. But behind our closed front door, her coldness and calculated greed follow me every single day, without fail, for 4 whole years. She never yells at me or throws tantrums, which makes it impossible for me to complain or explain how hurt I am to anyone. She uses the cruelest kind of abuse, the silent, invisible kind that chips away at your confidence and hope little by little. At dinner, she always slides the best steaks and freshest fruit over to Jason and Zoe, leaving me with nothing but scraps and leftover sides. When new clothes and toys come around, her kids get the latest styles, the biggest sets, the nicest everything. I'm lucky if I get one plain, cheap t-shirt for my dad on my birthday, and that's it. The 2 biggest, brightest kid bedrooms next to the master suite belong to Jason and Zoe. I'm stuck in a tiny, dark room right by the staircase. No windows, no natural light, no little luxuries at all. Dad sees every single bit of this, but he chooses to look away. He's weak and selfish at his core. He loves the easy, peaceful life Maya gives him. He loves the warm, lively family atmosphere she's built, and he refuses to let me ruin it. To him, ignoring me, sacrificing my feelings, and letting me get pushed aside is the simplest way to keep his comfortable second marriage intact. My grandparents make everything even worse. They've always favored boys, and they've always blamed my biological mom's strong, independent personality for my parents' divorce. They spoil Jason rotten and treat me, their own granddaughter, like a stranger. Every holiday, every gift, every cash envelope goes straight to Jason and Zoe. I'm always the last one they remember, if they remember me at all. Even our distant relatives see the unfairness plain and clear, yet no one ever says a word. Adults always choose to mind their own business. No one wants to upset my dad and stepmom, who have more money and connections in town. At way too young of an age, I learned exactly how cold and selfish people can be. Still, I never gave up hoping. I craved my dad's attention more than anything in the world. I'd always dreamed of having a real family vacation, the kind every other kid gets to experience. I waited an entire month for this trip. I finished all my summer homework early, carefully folded my only pretty floral dress, polished my white canvas shoes over and over again, and counted down every single day until we were supposed to leave. A week before our departure, the mood in our house shifted completely. I overheard my dad and Maya arguing quietly in the study. They kept their voices low, but I stood outside the door and caught every critical word. Maya's tone was sharp and frustrated, no longer sweet and gentle like usual. We worked so hard to book the top-floor oceanfront suite, the private yacht charter, and the Michelin dining reservations. This package is strictly for a family of 3. It doesn't include an extra person. Leah's too young and fussy. She'll slow us down, ruin our relaxation, and destroy the entire vacation vibe for everyone. Dad sounded hesitant and guilty, torn between his wife and me. I promised her this trip months ago. She's been looking forward to it nonstop. It's cruel to leave her out last minute. Maya let out a cold, bitter laugh. Cruel? Brian, be realistic. This vacation is for us to relax, for Jason and Zoe to see new places and have fun. It's not a free babysitting service for your ex-wife's kid. If you insist on bringing Leah, we're canceling the entire trip right now. Choose. Either you go with your daughter, or you go with your real family. In that moment, my blood ran cold. My whole body froze up. I clamped a hand over my mouth to muffle any sound, and hot tears instantly filled my eyes. I knew right then, the perfect summer dream I'd waited a whole month for was falling apart. For the next few days, Dad acted strange around me. He stopped talking to me voluntarily, avoided my eyes, and looked away with guilt every time our gazes met. I was too scared to ask him anything. I couldn't bear to hear the confirmation of what I already knew deep down. I kept packing my small suitcase anyway, foolishly hoping everything would work out. The night before we were supposed to leave, Dad finally walked into my tiny bedroom. He knelt down beside my packed suitcase, his eyes darting everywhere but my face, his tone flat and empty. He told me the resort had limited spots, the vacation package only covered 3 people, and I couldn't come along this time. He tried to soothe me with empty promises. He said he'd take me on a special little trip alone someday, that he'd make it up to me. Even at 9 years old, I knew every word was a lie, but I nodded obediently anyway. I knew if I cried, threw a fit, or begged, he'd only grow tired of me. I'd only end up even more invisible and unloved in this house. I thought the worst thing that could happen was staying home alone for a week, with the neighbor checking in on me now and then. I never, in my wildest nightmares, imagined my own father would make the decision that would change my entire life, the decision to leave his 9-year-old daughter stranded and abandoned. On the early morning of our departure day, the sky was just beginning to lighten, streaked with soft, pale dawn colors along the horizon. The entire house buzzed with chaotic, excited energy. Jason and Zoe raced back and forth across the floors, screaming and chattering nonstop about yachts, sandy beaches, and fancy seafood feasts. Sun care products, and custom-tailored swimsuits. Her face lit up with pure anticipation for the luxurious vacation ahead. I was the only quiet one in the whole house. I sat alone on the living room sofa, wearing my one and only nice dress and clutching a small canvas bag tightly in my hands. My heart was tangled with nervousness and quiet sorrow. I'd already made peace with staying home alone for the week, but right before we headed out, my dad suddenly glanced over at me. "Leah, come ride with us to the airport to see us off," he said. "Think of it as a little morning drive." A spark of desperate hope flared up inside me. Naive and longing, I convinced myself he'd softened his heart, changed his mind, and was going to take me along after all. Long-suppressed joy bubbled up in my chest. I stood up at once and followed the whole family outside, climbing quietly into my dad's private car. The car ride to the airport was filled with nonstop laughter and chatter. Maya and the kids gushed endlessly about the resort's fancy amenities, private swimming pools, and stunning ocean sunsets. My dad chimed in every now and then, and the mood was warm and harmonious for everyone but me. I huddled in the far corner of the back seat, silent and tense, clinging to a fragile prayer. I begged for a miracle, just one chance to finally have a happy summer vacation of my own. We pulled up to the city's international airport terminal. The building was bustling with crowds of travelers, everyone hurrying along with rolling suitcases. Airport announcements echoed nonstop over the speakers, broadcasting boarding updates and safety reminders. Bright sunlight streamed through the towering floor-to-ceiling glass windows, lighting up the clean, spacious lobby. Yet all that warmth and liveliness did nothing to chase away the cold dread settling deep in my heart. Dad parked the car and led us into the terminal. I stayed at the very back of our little group, walking closely in his footsteps, terrified of being left behind. After he finished all the check-in procedures and tucked his tickets and documents away safely, I timidly tugged at the hem of his shirt and whispered my question. "Dad, can I come with you? I'll be good. I promise I won't make any noise or cause trouble." Dad looked down at me, and every trace of his usual gentleness was gone. All that remained was cold, unyielding resolve. He gently pushed my hand away, his tone casual and indifferent, as if he were talking about something completely insignificant, and that casualness hurt more than anger ever could. "You can't come, Leah. There are no tickets or lodging reserved for you." Tears instantly pricked my eyes. I fought hard to hold them back, my voice trembling and thick with emotion as I asked again, "What am I supposed to do then? I want to go home." I will never forget the words he said next, nor the icy, unfeeling look in his eyes for as long as I live. "No one's home at the house, and the neighbor who was supposed to watch you is out of town today. Wait here for a little while. Someone will come get us after our flight takes off." 9-year-old me froze completely on the spot, my mind going blank with disbelief. I stared up at my own father, then at my perfectly made-up stepmother standing beside him with a blank, apathetic expression, and at my step-siblings who laughed and played without a single glance my way. In that moment, I understood true despair for the very first time in my life. This was no last-minute decision. He'd planned every single detail from the very start. He deliberately brought me to the airport, deliberately left me stranded alone in this huge, unfamiliar terminal, all so he could enjoy a carefree, luxurious vacation with his new wife and her kids without any guilt or burden. He didn't want me holding him back. He didn't want the weight of his conscience slowing him down. So he'd chosen the cruelest way possible to abandon his own 9-year-old daughter. Panic and terror crashed over me all at once. I couldn't hold my tears back any longer, and they spilled down my cheeks in big, heavy drops. I grabbed tight to the cuff of his shirt, shaking his arm desperately as I begged through broken sobs. "Dad, please don't leave me. I'm scared. I want to go home. Please, just take me with you." My breakdown and pleading didn't stir a single ounce of mercy in him. He roughly ripped his arm free, the force of his shove sending me stumbling backward several steps. I nearly fell flat on the cold hard floor. Maya stood there and watched the whole thing unfold without a single reaction, a faint, triumphant smile tugging secretly at her lips. At last, she was free of me, the unwanted burden, and could enjoy her perfect vacation with her own children without any distractions. "Stop throwing a fit, Leah. Be reasonable," Dad snapped, his voice cold and impatient. "We're in a hurry. The flight won't wait for us. Stay right here, don't wander off, and someone will come get you soon." With that, he never glanced my way again. He took Maya's hand, turned toward the security checkpoint with Jason and Zoe trailing beside him, and walked away without a single backward glance. The 4 of them looked close and happy, their figures growing smaller and smaller until they vanished completely from my sight. The massive airport terminal swarmed with people and noise, yet in the span of a few seconds, I became the loneliest, most helpless child in the entire bustling building. All the laughter, all the rushing crowds, all the joyful family moments around me had nothing to do with me. I stood frozen in place, my whole body trembling uncontrollably as tears streamed nonstop down my face. I had no cash, no phone, no house keys, no form of identification on me at all. I was only wearing my thin summer dress and a pair of clean white shoes, with nothing but an empty canvas bag in my hand. My own biological father had left me completely abandoned in a strange airport, all alone. At first, I clung to a tiny shred of hope. I told myself he was just scaring me, that he'd walk back out of security any second, that his heart would soften and he'd come get me. I stared fixed on the security entrance for 2 full hours. The bright midday sun slowly dimmed to a softer afternoon glow. Airport announcements droned on, flight after flight taking off and landing, crowds coming and going. Everyone moved forward with their lives, everyone except me. I stood there forgotten, completely alone. My stomach ached with sharp, empty hunger. I hadn't eaten a single bite of food or drunk a drop of water since dawn. I watched other parents buy burgers, juice, and ice cream for their kids, watched countless families traveling together, laughing and enjoying each other's company. Overwhelming grief and crushing loneliness washed over me. Passers-by occasionally glanced at the little girl standing alone and crying, their eyes filled with confusion and sympathy. One kind white woman stopped and knelt down beside me, asking gently if I was lost, if I'd gotten separated from my family. I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came out. I could only shake my head and cry harder. I couldn't bring myself to tell a stranger the brutal truth, that my own father had intentionally abandoned me. It was too cruel, too painful for a 9-year-old child to bear. Hour after hour ticked by. 3 hours, 4 hours passed, and I finally accepted the bitter truth. No one was coming back for me. My dad had truly left me behind. Right then, he was sitting on a plane bound for Florida, eagerly heading toward his luxurious vacation, soaking up the sun, the beaches, and fancy meals, completely forgetting the daughter he'd stranded alone at the airport. Fear swallowed me whole. I was just a little 9-year-old kid. I didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't know where the police station was. I didn't have a single person left to call. My grandparents always favored my step-siblings and would never care about me. My distant relatives were cold and indifferent and would never stand up for me. My dad had abandoned me entirely. In that terrifying moment, only one name surfaced in my mind, a name I hadn't dared think about, hadn't spoken to in 4 long years. My biological mother, Erin. My only memories of my mother stretch back to before I turned 5, to the summer my parents got divorced. That was the first loss I ever knew in my life, the starting point of every regret that's lingered through my childhood. As I grew a little older, I pieced together the full truth of their divorce during countless quiet, sleepless nights. While my dad, Brian, was still married to my mom, he'd been cheating on her with Maya for a long time. He hid his marital status, carried on a reckless, affectionate affair with a younger, beautiful woman, and wasted their shared marital money just to win her over. My mom was young, bold, and fiercely independent back then. The second she discovered his betrayal, she didn't break down, didn't beg, didn't cling to a broken marriage. She saw straight through my dad's selfish, cowardly, irresponsible nature and chose divorce without a single hesitation. During the divorce negotiations, my dad took cruel advantage of her. She had just started her business and was financially unstable, with no solid footing to stand on. He fought viciously for full custody of me. He deliberately smeared her reputation, lying to everyone that she was too career-obsessed to take care of a child. He used public opinion and underhanded tactics to pressure her into letting me go. With my grandparents fully backing him up, my mom had no choice but to give in. Through unbearable heartache, she left me in my dad's care. That year when she walked away from me, her heart was completely shattered. She snuck to my school to see me countless times, crying alone through endless sleepless nights. But to avoid disrupting my life, to stop the endless, toxic fights with my dad, she made the painful choice to cut off all contact entirely. She cut ties with every relative in this town, left the city all by herself, and started over from nothing, fighting tooth and nail to build a life of her own. For 4 whole years, my dad poisoned my mind against her day in and day out. He told me my mom abandoned me. He told me she never loved me. He told me she'd chosen her career over her own flesh and blood. He made me resent her, made me try to erase her from my memory, all to cover up his own cheating and selfishness. For those 4 years I obeyed. I stopped missing her, stopped trying to reach her, pretended I didn't have a birth mother at all. But in this moment, at my lowest, most helpless, completely abandoned by the whole world, she was the only lifeline I had left. Airport staff finally noticed me, a little girl sitting alone for hours, crying nonstop. A kind, middle-aged female airport attendant walked over gently. She led me to the service desk, handed me warm water and small cookies, and asked softly what had happened to me. I hesitated for a long time, my throat tight and burning with tears. Finally, I choked out the words. I wanted to call my mom. That phone number, untouched for 4 years, was burned permanently into my memory. It was the number I dialed every single day before I turned 5, the most familiar string of digits in my entire childhood. With trembling little hands, guided by the kind attendant, I pressed every familiar number one by one. The phone rang twice before picking up instantly. On the other end came a soft, steady voice, warm yet slightly unfamiliar after 4 years of silence. It was her voice. Even after all this time, it was still the one sound that could instantly calm the panic raging inside me. Hello! That single word shattered every wall I'd built up. For hours of fear, grief, and hopelessness burst out all at once. I cried uncontrollably into the phone, my sobs broken and ragged, too overwhelmed to form a single complete sentence. Mom! Mom, it's me. Leah! Silence fell over the line for a heartbeat, followed by quick, shaky breathing. Her voice tensed immediately, sharp with urgent panic and worry. Leah! My baby! After 4 years, you're finally calling me. Where are you? What happened? Why are you crying? Through my tears, I stumbled through the whole story. I told her my dad had brought me to the airport, then left me here all by myself while he took my stepmom and her kids on vacation. I told her I had no money, no phone, no one to look after me. I told her how scared I was, how I thought I had no one left in the world. I'd expected anger, complaint, or coldness from her after 4 years of no contact between us. But I was completely wrong. There was no blame in her voice at all, only overwhelming heartache and burning rage. Her tone shook with suppressed emotion, not fear, not panic, but pure, furious disappointment toward my dad. Don't be scared, baby. Mom's here. Her voice hardened into steady, unshakable strength, gentle yet firm. Stay right there at the airport service desk. Don't move. Don't go with anyone. Mom will come get you immediately. I'll have everything arranged in 10 minutes, and I'm on my way. No one will ever abandon you again. No one will ever hurt you again. After hanging up, the tight, terrified tension in my body finally loosened. Tears still streamed down my face, but most of my fear had faded away. I sat quietly in the chair at the service desk, waiting patiently for her arrival. The airport staff stayed with me the whole time, comforting me softly, bringing me more snacks and warm water, repeating over and over that everything would be okay. As I waited, I slowly understood the truth I'd never known. My mom had never truly let me go in these 4 years. Even with zero contact, she'd watched over me from afar the entire time. She asked friends for updates on my life. She silently endured the pain of watching me grow neglected, overlooked, and mistreated in that cold, unfair home. She didn't stay away because she didn't love me. She stayed away because she loved me too much. She knew how selfish and stubborn my dad was. She knew how unreasonable my grandparents could be. She knew if she'd rushed in to intervene too early, it would only trigger endless family fights, making my life harder and causing me to suffer even more targeting and unfair treatment. So she endured in silence. She worked tirelessly to build her strength and wealth, waiting patiently for the day she would be powerful enough to pull me out of that dark place for good, to give me a safe, stable life and the protection I'd always deserved. In the 4 years after the divorce, my mom built her business entirely from scratch. She endured countless hardships, pulled all-nighters one after another, faced endless setbacks and unfair suppression. Through sheer grit and determination, she carved out a successful place for herself in the business world and built a substantial personal fortune. She stayed humble and low-key, never flaunting her achievements to anyone, quietly accumulating power and resources solely for the day she could rescue me. Meanwhile, my dad coasted lazily on his family's inheritance. He never strived for anything, never improved himself. Selfish and complacent, he indulged Maya's calculation and greed, slowly burning through his own blessings, ruining his reputation, his future, and the precious father-daughter bond we could have shared. Side by side, the difference was crystal clear. One person chose sacrifice, perseverance, and unconditional love. The other chose laziness, betrayal, and cruel selfishness. Good and evil never looked more distinct. I'd assumed Mom would drive to the airport to pick me up, which would take at least several hours. I sat quietly at the service desk, wiping my tears away and waiting nervously, unsure how much longer I'd have to hold on. But less than 2 hours later, airport staff suddenly received an urgent notice. A private jet was about to land at the airport's exclusive private tarmac, and the owner was heading straight into the terminal to pick up a passenger. Just a few minutes after the announcement, a sharp, elegant woman walked quickly into the terminal. She wore a sleek, professional black business suit, her long hair pulled back neatly and sharply. Her makeup was polished and understated. She carried a quiet, powerful presence, her eyes soft yet unshakably determined as she walked straight toward the service desk where I sat. It was her, my mom Erin. For years apart had changed her in so many ways. The soft, gentle naivety of her younger years was gone. In its place was the sharp poise, steady confidence, and powerful aura of a successful businesswoman. She looked calm, grounded, and utterly radiant. Yet the way she looked at me hadn't changed at all. Her gaze overflowed with pure, unreserved love and longing, the same love I'd missed for years. The second her eyes landed on me, every layer of strength and composure she'd held firmly in place crumbled completely. She rushed forward, dropped to her knees in front of me, and pulled me tightly into her arms. Her hold was tender yet desperate, like she was trying to squeeze 4 years of longing, guilt, and heartache into one single embrace. My Leah, my precious baby, I'm so sorry I'm late. I'm so sorry you had to go through this. Her voice trembled and cracked with tears. Warm tears fell from her eyes and landed softly on the top of my head. Buried deep in her safe, warm embrace, I finally felt the motherly comfort and security I'd been starved of for 4 whole years. Every bit of loneliness, every ignored hurt, every quiet breakdown, every terrifying moment of being abandoned exploded out of me. I cried harder than I ever had in my life, releasing every ounce of pain I'd carried alone for so long. All the airport staff fell silent, watching our long-awaited reunion with pure sympathy and tenderness. No one standing there knew that this powerful, wealthy female entrepreneur had dropped hundreds of millions of dollars worth of ongoing business at a moment's notice, chartered a private jet across cities, and rushed here nonstop, all just to rescue her 9-year-old daughter who had been cruelly abandoned by her own father. Mom held me close, gently wiped my tears, and never let go of my hand for a single second. She walked me out of the busy terminal and guided me onto her private jet. The cabin was spacious, luxurious, spotlessly clean, and fully equipped with every comfort imaginable. Warm, soft lighting filled every corner, calm and soothing. It was the complete opposite of the cold, cramped, depressing life I'd lived under my dad's roof for the past 4 years. The plane took off smoothly and climbed steadily through the layers of clouds. Through the window, I watched the city below shrink smaller and smaller, and the heavy depression and shadow weighing on my heart slowly faded away. Sitting right beside me, her arms wrapped securely around me, Mom finally told me the full truth behind everything I'd never understood growing up. She told me how my dad had cheated on her without a single shred of guilt during their marriage, how he'd willingly abandoned his husbandly and parental duties just to please Maya, pouring all his time, energy, and money into his new family without a second thought. Back during the divorce, she'd had nothing. No savings, no connections, no stable career. She'd been completely powerless to fight for my custody. If she tried to raise me back then, I would have had to suffer through poverty and hardship right alongside her. To keep me from struggling, to let me grow up with a stable home and basic security, she'd made the heart-wrenching choice to let me go. For every single day of those 4 years, she'd never stopped watching over me. She knew all about Maya's quiet, cold violence and deliberate targeting. She knew how Dad constantly ignored my feelings and favored his stepchildren. She saw my grandparents' blatant prejudice and indifference. She knew I'd spent every day in that house walking on eggshells, small, quiet, and endlessly depressed. There were countless times she'd wanted to step in, to take me away and save me from all the pain. But she'd always known impulsive action would never truly protect me. My dad had inherited wealth, family support, and a stable home. Back then, she hadn't had the strength to win a custody battle. Any reckless intervention would only have made things worse for me, leaving me facing even more exclusion and unfair treatment. So she chose to wait. She chose to endure every lonely, painful day in silence. She pushed herself to work harder, to build her wealth, expand her connections, and gather top-tier legal resources. She waited patiently for the perfect moment, one where she could take me back legally, honorably, and permanently, and make every single person who'd hurt me pay the legitimate price for their actions. Mom stroked my hair gently, her eyes steady and resolute as she spoke firmly. Leah, I have never abandoned you. Every year of waiting, every day of holding back, was all for this moment. From today forward, no one will ever ignore you, hurt you, or leave you behind again. Mom will protect you with everything I have. I'll give you the good life you deserve, and every bit of love you've been missing all these years. Leaning against her chest, watching the brilliant sunset glow spread across the endless clouds outside the window, I felt true peace and happiness for the very first time in my life. I finally understood the truth no one had ever told me before. Blood doesn't make family. Real family are the people who love you fiercely, protect you unconditionally, and never, ever give up on you. We didn't waste a single second on the flight back home. The moment the plane was airborne, Mom contacted her long-term team of top family law attorneys. After years working in high-stakes business and handling countless complex dispute cases, her legal team consisted of some of the best family law specialists in the entire country. They were fully versed in child protection laws, custody modification regulations, and marital asset division statutes. Calm, decisive, and incredibly thorough, Mom laid out every single detail for her legal team. She shared the full story of my abandonment at the airport, the years of ongoing domestic cold violence, my dad's complete parental negligence, and Maya's deliberate, long-term mistreatment of me. She instructed her team to launch a full, legal pursuit of justice as quickly as possible. No irrational fights, no messy confrontations, no private retaliation. Every step would follow the official U.S. legal system, clean, honorable, fair, and irreversible. She was determined to get me the justice I deserved through legitimate, official channels. Her legal team immediately began working around the clock, dividing tasks efficiently and systematically. One group compiled ironclad evidence of my dad's child abandonment, airport surveillance footage, official staff witness statements, my personal testimony, and recorded phone call evidence. Another group gathered proof of my dad's marital infidelity, misuse of marital funds, and years of failure to provide proper child support and parental care. A third team organized all supporting documentation of Maya's long-term emotional abuse and targeted discrimination against a minor child. At the same time, the lawyers began drafting the complete set of official legal documents, custody modification petitions, back child support claims, marital asset division filings, and formal legal charges for child abandonment negligence. Mom oversaw every single detail personally, double-checking every piece of evidence and every legal clause to ensure the entire case was flawless, airtight, and legally unbreakable. We will not argue, we will not beg, and we will never stoop to petty revenge, she told me softly but firmly. We let the law hand down the final, fair verdict. Your father's selfishness and Maya's greed will finally bring them the legal consequences they've earned. While Mom was building this perfect, legal case against them, my dad and stepmom were completely oblivious, drowning in the pleasure of their luxury vacation. They soaked up the sunshine, enjoyed private yacht rides, feasted on fine dining, and indulged in every lavish resort amenity. They truly believed they'd gotten rid of me for good, that they could now enjoy all the family wealth and peaceful life without any burden or interruption. They had no idea that the life of ease and privilege they were celebrating was already crumbling beneath their feet. A legal reckoning that would completely overturn their world was fully prepared, quietly waiting for the day they returned home. For 7 whole days, my father's new family indulged themselves in unrestrained luxury at their Florida resort. They enjoyed every exclusive perk the 5-star property had to offer: the top-floor oceanfront suite, private yacht charters out at sea, custom Michelin fine dining, and exclusive beach amenities. Every premium luxury experience was theirs to savor. Maya was in high spirits the entire trip, thoroughly relishing a perfect vacation free of my presence and burden. She spent her days spoiling Jason and Zoe, posing for endless photos, and indulging in every pleasure the resort provided. She controlled every minute of my father's time and every penny of his wealth, quietly mapping out her ideal future. She was utterly convinced I had been permanently cast aside by my father. In her mind, all the family's wealth, favor, and resources would from then on belong solely to her 2 children. Her 4 years of scheming had finally paid off, or so she thought. Occasionally, A faint flicker of guilt crossed my father's mind, a fleeting thought of the daughter he'd abandoned alone at the airport. But the momentary remorse vanished in an instant, easily drowned out by the luxurious surroundings, carefree atmosphere, and the constant laughter of his new family. He selfishly deluded himself into believing a neighbor or distant relative had surely taken me in, that I was safe and sound, and that his cruel choice had been completely justified. He drowned himself in false peace and happiness, willfully abandoning his paternal responsibilities and ignoring the illegal reality of leaving a minor child stranded and unattended. He assumed the whole incident would fade away, quietly. He thought I was far too young to resist or fight back, that no one would ever stand up for a forgotten little girl like me. My grandparents knew every detail of what had happened, yet they chose to turn a blind eye and condone my father's actions. Blinded by their favoritism toward their step-grandchildren, they were genuinely relieved to have me out of the picture. To them, one less unwanted granddaughter meant more resources and affection for Jason, a simpler, more favorable life for their beloved new family. Over those 7 days, the selfishness, indifference, prejudice, and calculation of every adult in that household laid fully exposed. While they basked in their lavish vacation, my mother's legal team advanced every preparation methodically, quietly, and entirely within the bounds of the law. Every step was low-key, orderly, and untraceable. Under the full witness and supervision of property managers, notaries, and attorneys, authorized staff legally entered my father's house. They systematically cleared out the tiny, cramped bedroom I had lived in for 4 years. Every piece of my clothing, every toy, book, stationery, and personal belonging was carefully packed and safely removed without a single scratch or damage. The entire process was fully transparent, legal, and standardized. The small, dark, oppressive room that had been my prison for 4 years was left completely empty, stripped of every trace of me. With its emptiness, I officially severed all ties with this cold household. All the neglect, grievance, and loneliness I had endured here left with me for good. Neatly arranged in the center of my old bed was a complete set of official legal documents. The thick stack contained clearly structured, thoroughly detailed legal paperwork backed by solid legal precedent, an official child abandonment liability notice, a child custody modification petition, a lawsuit claiming years of unpaid child support, a marital asset division application, documented evidence of long-term domestic emotional abuse, and an official court summons. Every document bore an official judicial seal. Every legal claim was supported by complete, irrefutable evidence. Every charge strictly complied with local U.S. legal statutes. There were no quarrels, no property damage, no violent conflict, only the most dignified, impartial, and powerful legal counterattack possible. After completing every procedure, the legal team recorded the entire process with video and photographic evidence before leaving silently. They disturbed no neighbors, sparked no commotion, and left the selfish, cold family with nothing but an empty bedroom and a weighty stack of court documents. When their 7-day luxury vacation came to an end, my father returned home with Maya, Jason, and Zoe, hauling suitcases full of souvenirs and wearing relaxed, satisfied smiles. They chatted cheerfully along the drive, reminiscing about their wonderful trip and planning their next getaway, completely immersed in their comfortable, self-satisfied bliss. But the moment they pushed open the front door, an eerie, suffocating silence hung over the house. The usual trivial household noises were gone, replaced by an unnatural, heavy atmosphere. None of them noticed the strangeness. They simply set down their luggage, ready to unpack and rest. Maya headed upstairs out of habit to sort their vacation clothes. Passing my old bedroom, she pushed the door open casually. In an instant, every smile and trace of delight on her face froze completely. Her triumphant joy vanished without a trace, replaced by pure, overwhelming shock, panic, and despair. The once cramped room filled with my belongings was now cold, barren, and completely empty. Every trace that I had lived there for 4 long years was erased, as if I had never existed in that house at all. Right in the middle of the vacant bed lay the thick stack of legally sealed court papers. Maya stiffened completely. Her hands trembling uncontrollably, she picked up the documents and flipped through them rapidly. After only a few pages, she fully understood the silent, devastating counterattack that had unfolded in their absence. All her years of scheming had finally and completely backfired. For 4 long years, she had subjected me to relentless emotional cold violence, deliberately deprived me of family resources, and plotted tirelessly to divert all my father's wealth and affection to her own children. Every calculation, every carefully laid plan, every selfish dream she had nurtured for years crumbled to dust in that single moment. Worse still, they now faced multiple severe legal consequences: full custody modification, massive back child support repayments, marital asset redistribution, and formal legal prosecution for child abandonment. Her perfect mask of grace and gentleness shattered completely. Overwhelmed by total emotional collapse, she screamed hysterically, her body trembling violently as the legal papers slipped from her hands and scattered across the floor. "No, this can't be happening. It's impossible." She was deathly pale, her eyes bloodshot and frantic. "How dare she? What right does she have? Our plans are ruined. Everything is gone." Hearing her frenzied screams from downstairs, my father rushed quickly up the stairs. He froze at the sight of the empty bedroom and the legal documents strewn across the floor. Bending down, he picked up the papers and read every word carefully. His face turned ghastly pale, then dark and livid before his eyes. Every trace of vacation joy, relaxed ease, and selfish Zhao vanished instantly. In its place came overwhelming panic, terror, guilt, and crushing regret. He finally comprehended how foolish, how devastating his momentary selfishness and cowardice had been. He had once thought abandoning his daughter was a trivial, inconsequential choice, that he could ignore his own flesh and blood without consequence, that he could enjoy a peaceful life and exclusive wealth indefinitely. But he had never imagined that the little girl he discarded had a mother who had spent years growing stronger, waiting patiently for the day to right every wrong. Staring at the empty room, countless forgotten memories flashed through his mind in an instant. He saw every time I'd timidly tried to gain his affection, every time I'd endured wrongs in silence, every time I'd cried alone in the dark, every time I'd hoped and prayed for his companionship. 4 years of neglect, 4 days of cold indifference, and the cruel abandonment at the airport all crashed down on him at once. Sharp, piercing guilt tore ruthlessly at his heart. He regretted it deeply, a bone-deep remorse. Yet even in his regret, selfishness and resentment lingered. He was sorry for his impulsive, self-destructive choice, for ruining his stable life and wealth, for facing impending disgrace and public shame. But he still refused to openly admit his faults, refused to sincerely repent for the profound harm he had inflicted on his own daughter. My grandparents hurried over in alarm. The second they saw the empty bedroom and the court summons, their faces drained of all color, consumed by unbridled panic. Their usual arrogance and biased favoritism crumbled completely before the authority of official legal documents. For the first time, their long-held prejudices and years of cold indifference wavered. They finally began to realize that their lifelong outlook and partiality had been utterly, terribly wrong. Jason and Zoe stood frozen nearby. The playful grins vanished entirely from their faces. Spoiled and indulged their whole lives, they felt genuine fear and unease for the very first time. They finally understood a harsh truth: the selfish schemes of adults would always boomerang and destroy the entire family. Within just 2 weeks after the legal summons was served, the case officially entered the formal judicial trial process. Those 2 weeks plunged my father's household into complete chaos and collapse, stripping every trace of the peace and comfort they had once enjoyed. Maya spiraled into severe anxiety and madness, growing hysterical and moody by the day. She constantly argued, complained, and blamed my father for everything, accusing him of being weak, hesitant, and indecisive. She screamed that his softness had ruined her perfect life and brought irreversible disaster upon their family. The seemingly sweet, loving second marriage they had cherished was torn apart entirely by endless quarrels and mutual suspicion. My father fell into prolonged silence and gloomy melancholy, trapped in crippling internal conflict and self-doubt. He was racked with guilt over hurting his own daughter, yet burned with resentment over his shrinking wealth and ruined reputation. He hated Maya's schemes and manipulation, yet could not bring himself to end their marriage completely. His inherent cowardice and selfishness left him trapped in an agonizing no-win situation. My grandparents lost all their former dominance and biased arrogance. They sighed and reflected in private countless times. Staring at the empty bedroom, they recalled how timid and cautious I had been all those years, drowning in overwhelming guilt and self-reproach. For the first time, they truly understood how absurd and wrong their prejudices had been, their favoritism toward the step-grandchildren, their unconditional partiality toward the new family, and their cold indifference toward their own granddaughter. Their long-held beliefs crumbled completely, and they could no longer defend Jason and Zoe with blind certainty. Jason and Zoe's personalities underwent a drastic transformation as well. Their usual spoiled arrogance and reckless willfulness vanished entirely. They no longer ran wild, fighting for attention and resources, growing quiet, restrained, and overly cautious. They finally realized their mother's manipulation and their father's favoritism had never brought them permanent peace. It had only led their whole family to collapse. A quiet sense of guilt settled over them as they began to understand that every bit of unconditional love and privilege they had monopolized over the years should have belonged partly to me. Meanwhile, under my mother's tender care and protection, I stepped completely out of the shadows of my childhood. I lived in her spacious, bright, warm house, surrounded every day by gentle treatment and sincere companionship. Little by little, I regained my cheerfulness, smile, and confidence. The deep emotional wounds from my broken family slowly healed, and my heart grew increasingly peaceful and steady. My mother stayed by my side every step of the way, comforting and guiding me with endless tenderness and patience, mending my shattered childhood piece by piece. On the day of the official trial, the courtroom stood solemn, dignified, and perfectly orderly. Following standard U.S. family court procedures, the case proceeded openly, fairly, and transparently. All evidence was presented in court, all legal claims were argued face-to-face, and every legal statute was cited on record. My mother's elite legal team represented the plaintiff, laying out the full facts and legal demands with impeccable clarity and rigorous logic. They submitted a complete, unbroken chain of evidence: airport surveillance footage, written witness statements from airport staff, the recorded phone call between my mother and me, documented proof of years of emotional cold violence at home, records of my father's marital infidelity, evidence of his long-term failure to fulfill parental obligations, and full documentation of his deliberate abandonment of a minor child. The attorneys emphasized key provisions under American child protection laws, custody modification statutes, and child abandonment liability regulations. They clearly established legal grounds. As my legal guardian, my father had willfully abandoned a 9-year-old minor, placing my personal safety in extreme danger. A clear violation of legal duties. For years, he had allowed his spouse to subject his biological child to persistent emotional abuse, failing to provide the statutory care, guardianship, and affection required by law, severely damaging a minor's mental and physical health. Additionally, his marital infidelity and misuse of joint marital assets constituted a fundamental breach of marital loyalty, establishing clear legal fault. Seated at the defendant's table, my father and Maya remained deathly pale, completely powerless to refute the evidence. My father attempted to defend himself, claiming his actions were mere momentary negligence rather than deliberate abandonment, trying to minimize his wrongdoing. However, the complete surveillance footage, official staff testimony, and a fully documented timeline of events utterly demolished his excuses. The evidence was irrefutable, leaving no room for argument. Maya tried to resume her false mask of kindness and innocence, denying any exclusion or emotional abuse toward me and attempting to rebuild her image as a devoted, fair stepmother. Yet years of documented daily mistreatment, neighbor witness statements, and recorded interactions thoroughly exposed her hypocrisy, laying bare her hidden schemes and malice for the entire court to see. My grandparents sat silently in the spectator section, their heads bowed in shame. Listening to every laid-out fact, every precise legal clause, and every overlooked harm I had endured over the years, they fully acknowledged their own prejudice and wrongdoing, unable to defend their son or step-grandchildren any longer. As the primary party to the case, I answered the judge's questions calmly and truthfully, recounting my 4 years of oppressive family life and the overwhelming terror and despair I had felt when abandoned. Without exaggerated accusation or deliberate pity, I simply stated the plain facts, and yet my quiet honesty moved everyone in the courtroom. After reviewing the complete evidence chain, relevant legal provisions, and core principles of minor protection, the judge delivered a final, impartial ruling that balanced law and humanity. First, the court officially modified legal custody. Full legal guardianship and physical custody of me were permanently transferred to my biological mother, Erin. My father, Brian, was stripped of all parental rights and guardianship permanently. He was denied unsupervised visitation without legitimate legal cause, completely eliminating any possibility of future harm to me. Second, for his years of failure to fulfill parental obligations and his criminal abandonment of a minor child, my father was ordered to pay full restitution, covering 4 years of unpaid child support, educational expenses, and compensation for emotional distress, payable in a single lump sum to remedy the years of physical and mental harm I had endured. Third, the court conducted a comprehensive legal division of all marital and personal assets owned by my father before and during the marriage. Given his multiple severe legal faults, marital infidelity, breach of spousal obligations, and child abandonment, the court issued a favorable property division ruling in accordance with law. All awarded assets were designated exclusively for my future growth, education, and living expenses, completely dismantling Maya's scheme to seize full control of the family wealth. Fourth, my father's illegal child abandonment was formally sanctioned by the court, with an official legal record filed and integrated into his personal credit and social file. This permanent, irreversible legal mark would impact his future career, social reputation, and credit assessment for the rest of his life, forcing him to bear lifelong consequences for his dereliction of parental duty. Fifth, the court issued a permanent restraining order prohibiting Maya from any form of harassment, entanglement, slander, or disturbance toward me, completely severing all negative ties between me and the family that had hurt me. The moment the verdict was read aloud, Maya collapsed weakly in the defendant's seat. All her arrogance and confidence vanished completely. Her eyes turned hollow, and her face drained of all color. 4 years of painstaking scheming amounted to nothing. Every selfish dream shattered beyond repair. My father sat rigidly, overwhelmed by utter defeat. He finally recognized the full gravity of his mistakes, consumed by endless, crushing regret. He had won temporary custody and a few years of easy comfort, yet he had lost his biological daughter, his reputation, his wealth, and ultimately his entire life. Years slipped by quickly, bringing final destinies for every person involved. Good and evil each received their due, and every cause met its consequence, closing the story in full circle. I bid farewell forever to my cold, oppressive original family, and lived steadily under my mother's care. Nurtured by her unconditional love and raised in a healthy, stable educational environment, I fully healed my childhood wounds. I grew into a confident, cheerful, kind, and outstanding young girl with excellent grades, sound values, and abundant security and happiness, completely free from the shadows of my past. My mother's career grew increasingly stable and successful. The two of us lived faithfully for each other, enjoying a peaceful, prosperous, and endlessly warm life. My father's reputation was completely ruined. Every neighbor, relative, and acquaintance learned of his shameful abandonment of his own daughter and his derelict parental duties. He lost all the dignity and respect he had once enjoyed. The permanent legal and credit record destroyed his access to high-quality social and career opportunities, dragging his standard of living into steady decline. His marriage to Maya collapsed completely, broken beyond repair. Endless quarrels, suspicion, blame, and resentment consumed every last trace of affection between them. They ultimately filed for divorce and parted ways for good. The once lively family crumbled into nothing but ruins. Maya was left with neither money nor security. After years of ruthless scheming, she gained none of the wealth she had coveted. Instead, she bore all the blame and regret for her family's destruction. Forced to raise her 2 children alone with greatly diminished means, she lost every trace of her former luxury and prestige, paying a lifelong price for her greed and cruelty. Jason and Zoe lost all their childhood arrogance and caprice. Growing up in a broken family and straitened circumstances, they were forced to mature early and taste the hardships of life. They finally understood that their parents' selfish schemes had backfired on the entire family. The biased favoritism they had once enjoyed was never a blessing. It was the root of their family's ruin. They grew quiet and restrained, but they could never reclaim the warm, complete family they had lost forever. My grandparents abandoned all their old prejudices and favoritism, spending their later years trapped in constant guilt and self-reproach. Watching my father's shattered family and my happy, thriving life under my mother's care, they reflected daily on their past ignorance and coldness, filled with irreversible regret that could never be mended. My father lived out the rest of his days in endless remorse. He occasionally caught distant glimpses of my thriving, confident life, yet he no longer held any right to approach me, accompany me, or make amends. He had personally abandoned the daughter who once loved him and longed for his affection above all else. He had destroyed his own family bond and future with his own hands, leaving himself with nothing but lifelong loneliness and regret. This story, which began with cruel abandonment and ended with sincere redemption, teaches us the simplest yet most profound truth. Family love is never a taken-for-granted gift, and responsibility is the fundamental bottom line of parenthood. All selfishness, indifference, scheming, and prejudice will eventually bring karmic retribution. The law always remains impartial, and every deed meets its due reward. Sincere love will always be gently protected, while deliberate harm will face lifelong judgment.